Since the first child was successfully born through in vitro fertilization in 1978, the issue of artificial fertilization has raised ethical issues among Catholics. And since it has become a priority of the Republican Party of late to ban it in the United States, it has become a controversial issue for everyone. But this is not a political matter, and there's nothing new about it. Since it was first practiced, the Catholic Church has spoken out against it as a gravely immoral act. What is the Catholic Church's teaching, and why is it so important in modern life? This is Catholicism in Focus. Before we jump into the ethical issues at stake, it's important to understand the actual science of what's going on and to distinguish between a number of different fertility treatments. As they say, the devil is in the details, and so we need to understand the differences between each. In vitro fertilization is the process of collecting an egg from an ovary, fertilizing and growing it in a lab, and placing the then embryo into a uterus. This may be returned to the original woman from which the egg was extracted, or into a surrogate who will carry the child to birth. Because the initial process can take up to 3 weeks and has a fairly low success rate, usually only around 20 to 35%, multiple eggs are fertilized at the same time. Sometimes multiple embryos are placed into a woman's uterus at the same time as well to ensure that at least one of them survives, but many times they are frozen and saved for future attempts. This whole process is different from the many forms of artificial insemination. As opposed to an in vitro fertilization, insemination does not require an egg to be removed and fertilized in a lab, but consists of injecting semen directly into either the uterus or the fallopian tube. It's also different from less invasive treatments such as using fertility lubricants that protect the sperm and support conception, and hormonal injections that address fertility issues in either the man or the woman. While each of these methods seeks to achieve the same end, namely the birth of a child, they are not all equal. In vitro fertilization is ethically problematic on at least 3 levels. First, it separates the conjugal act from conception. Rather than a child being produced by the love of a mother and father in a natural setting, it's produced by a third party using test tubes and petri dishes. How romantic! The Catechism of the Catholic Church, drawing on the CDF's document Donum Vitae, teaches, "The act which brings the child into existence is no longer an act by which 2 persons give themselves to another, but one that entrusts the life and identity of the embryo into the power of doctors and biologists and establishes the domination of technology over the origin and destiny of the human person. Such a relationship of domination is in itself contrary to the dignity and equality that must be common to parents and children." What does it do to the dignity of a child to know that they were produced not out of an act of love, but by a scientist putting together biological pieces in a lab? What does it do to the dignity of sex itself if it is purely transactional, that a couple can produce a child without even being in the same room together? The Church believes that both are cheapened. In the 1968 document Humanae Vitae, the Church teaches that there is an inseparable connection between the unitive significance and the procreative significance, which are both inherent to the marriage act. In other words, sex is for bringing a couple together and producing children, not one or the other, and not one and then the other. They're the same act. But there is a second issue to in vitro fertilization, and that is what happens to the extra embryos. If multiple eggs are fertilized to increase the chance of success, but multiple children are not wanted, something needs to be done with them. Generally, there are 3 options, and none of them are good. They're stuck in a freezer to potentially use later, used for testing and then disposed of, or let grow inside of a uterus alongside other embryos, and then selectively aborted when the ideal embryo is determined. Yeah, that is no way to make a child. For Catholics, this is not just some science project. If life begins at conception, then what's happening here is an affront to the dignity afforded every human life, and it cannot be tolerated. It is not morally acceptable to bring a life into the world through a means that requires the destruction of many others. But even that is not the end of our problems, as the use of surrogacy and donations further complicate the matter. While these are only optional with in vitro fertilization and are much less common, they are far from ethical. In having a third party carry a child to term, or worse yet, accepting sperm or eggs from unknown donors, the lines of parenthood are severely blurred, and the dignity of women is degraded. Building off of Pope Francis's call to have the practice universally banned, Bishop Robert Barron said earlier this year, "Surrogacy represents the commodification and instrumentalization of a woman's body, treating her as a carrier rather than a human person. And just as troubling is the fact that the child is reduced to terms of buying and selling as an object of human trafficking." While movies and television have made practices like these seem normal, even comical, they really are, as Pope Francis calls it, a deplorable act. Taken all together, it is abundantly clear that in vitro fertilization, even if done with the best of intentions, is just not something the Church can ever support. But what about other fertility treatments? Because artificial insemination avoids the second and third issues completely, the Church is much less harsh in its approach, saying it is less reprehensible. To the extent that it separates the conjugal act from conception, which is often the case, it is still morally unacceptable, but there is actually a way around this. In one form of artificial insemination, semen is collected from the sexual act itself and is directed towards the fallopian tubes. Even though artificial means are used and additional people are involved, the Church allows this because these outside influences are meant to aid the effect of the sexual act rather than outright replace it. We're all for using technology, we just don't want it to strip our humanity in the process. It's why the Church generally has no problem with less invasive treatments like fertility lubricants or hormonal injections. Their presence simply enhances what naturally occurs, helping the body to do what it may be unable to do on its own, not unlike eyeglasses. In general, it's about preserving the dignity of all involved: the couple, the act itself, and of course, the child that is produced. As long as all three are upheld, the practice is fine. But what if they're not? What if someone engages in an immoral fertility practice and is successful producing a child? Is the child to be treated any differently? The answer, which I hope is obvious, is no. No matter what sins the parents commit in producing the child, it is ultimately God who gives life and God who creates in his image and likeness. There are no second-class human beings or anyone who deserves any less dignity because of how they were conceived. All human life, no matter what, is blessed. But the same cannot be said for the parents, the surrogates, or the doctors, who should take seriously the sins they are committing. They may be acting out of a sense of desperation. They may just be trying to help. But we must always remember two things. A child is a gift, not a right, and the ends do not justify the means. Having a child should be a beautiful blessing for a family, not an occasion for sin. If you have to hurt, degrade, or even kill another to have a child, it may not be what God desires.